Okay, let's get down to business. I would like to introduce our presenter for the day, Dr. Becki Cohn-Vargas, which has a rich and varied career over 35 years, contributing significantly in the educational settings. She has been a Spanish bilingual teacher, principal, curriculum director, and superintendent in urban, rural, and suburban pre-K through 12 education settings. Dr. Cohn-Vargas is a leading scholar in the field of identity safety. She also co-authored 4 books and numerous articles on identity safe teaching and has produced films and consulted with schools across the U.S. So welcome, Becki. I will hand this over to you.
Let's get started. So to tell you a little more about myself, a little about my career, I grew up in Carmel, California, also lived in New York City, went to elementary school there, lived in South Bend, Indiana for sixth and seventh grade, and then finished my education in K-12 in Palo Alto. I've also lived in Guatemala and Nicaragua, and now I live in California in the East Bay of San Francisco Bay Area. My parents actually fled the Holocaust, and that led me to have this passion for trying to address bigotry and make environments where everyone felt safe and included. And I love writing and gardening and traveling, and I have 3 adult children who are, all 3 of them are LGBTQ, and I have 2 grandchildren. One's 3 months old and the other's 5 years old. So you'll get to meet them as we get going. What we're doing here today is looking at what we call the 3 pillars of student-centered teaching, and it's actually ABC: agency, belonging, and competence. And the identity safety work I've done is about creating spaces where students feel who they are, what they think, how they feel matters, and drawing from their identities as an evidence-based foundation for learning. And all the agency, belonging, and competence is seen through the lens of how can we create these safe spaces for kids. I'm also going to be drawing from the work of visible learning research, and many of you may already know about the visible learning program, and you'll find out a little more about it. So the research on identity safety and the mega studies in visible learning form a solid foundation, and you're going to walk away with practical strategies so you can learn how to foster those ABCs in your schools and communities. Here's the definition of an identity-safe school. That's where students feel who they are as an asset rather than a barrier to belonging and achievement, and everyone is welcomed, supported, and valued. Visible learning is a collection of meta-analyses of studies on different topics that show promise in teaching and learning. And they do that by looking at these studies of all different aspects of learning and what are the ones that result in actual student learning. And they've created an effect size so you find out how powerful a particular type of learning is. And if the effect size is over 0.40, that means it has the greatest potential to improve learning for students. And you can see on the bottom is a website where you can find out about all different aspects of visible learning meta-studies and meta-analyses. Visible learning also looks at negative effect sizes, and you can see some examples here. This is from the Illustrated Guide to Visible Learning, and you could see that just a few examples: students feeling disliked, 0.26, that is negative, as well as bullying, boredom, and labeling students. So we're always looking both at the positive things that help kids and also the things that maybe detract from their learning. There's a major research study that was done on identity safety, and that research was looking at classrooms and how their sense of who they are based on their different aspects of their identity is valued and validated, and it's how it impacts their learning. And the data from this study, it's called the Stanford Integrated School Project, and SISP. I don't know. I think my picture was blocking it, but maybe not on your screen. Um, so they went into classrooms. This was a $500,000 study where students in third and fifth grade classrooms were surveyed, and if they couldn't read they well enough, they were surveyed verbally. And there were also classroom observations and test scores. And they saw that in classrooms with identity safety and identity safe teaching, students from every ethnic group felt a stronger sense of belonging, they felt agency, they felt identity safe, and they scored higher on standardized tests. And the educators the researchers looked at the teaching strategies in the classroom. It was bottom up. So in classrooms where people felt more belonging, more identity safe, and did better, teachers did certain things. And okay, why did hmm, maybe um and they looked at what were the teachers doing in those classrooms that led to the identity safe. And they found that students felt they could express their authentic identity, so different things, and we'll talk about how to do that. And they were able to have a lot of agency, autonomy, and a voice in the classroom. And they had classrooms where teachers created positive relationships and where students felt they were included and what they said was heard. And they developed confidence in a way, an environment that was caring and supportive. And the qualities that you see there are probably things you already do and know about doing, but looking at them together and how they impact kids is what we're going to talk about today. How to enhance this so that students feel even more successful and competent. Whoops. Um, let's see now that. So what does that look like? Like some of the key practices are giving kids a choice, giving them a chance to express themselves and helping them build that confidence in doing that. Personalized instruction that's looking at what kids really need, which is the heart of student-centered teaching, and opportunities for collaboration, reflecting on what they're learning and getting feedback in a positive way. And we'll talk more about that. And then high expectations with scaffolding. And recently, Zaretta Hammond has been talking about you want to have good scaffolding, but you need to take away the scaffolds too, so they're not dependent on them. And the learning is personalized, so to their needs. So let's begin by talking about agency. And agency is, well, here's my daughter. I told you you'd meet some of my kids. My daughter's actually 48 years old now, but this is her when she was 5. And currently she has a salon where she does skincare treatments, and she's actually creating products that they're selling to other salons. And somebody did something right with agency with her. I'm sure it was a combination of all the different teachers she had and our efforts to give her a sense that she could do it. And here are some feelings people have when they have agency. They feel, I'm making this happen. And I'm proud when I solve problems of my own. I can make my own decisions. And I feel empowered when my choices lead to good outcomes. These are all different examples of what agency feels like. And to do well in school, to have a sense of academic, an identity that I'm smart, I can do these things, I'm confident. All these things help having kids be successful in school. In the visible learning meta studies, here's some examples of the research. Students driving their own learning has a 0.96 effect size. That's very high. And self-efficacy has a 0.67. And these are very strong outcomes. So the things you can do to give your students a sense that what they're doing can make a difference, and they have that sense of agency. And I wanted to tell you about the little pictures. On the visible learning slides, I showed pictures of animals. My husband and I have a little tropical rainforest preserve in Nicaragua. And so this is a Central American possum. In case you were wondering, they're so cute. I think that one looks like it has lots of agency. What kinds of things can you do to promote agency? And so think about the way you give choice. And here's a picture of my young grandson. His name's Anteo. And so he has a lot of interest in dinosaurs. He's always been fascinated since he was young. He's not the only one, but he seems to have a sense of learning the names of dinosaurs, and he can probably tell you what all those dinosaurs are in the picture. So doing something like this puzzle that draws on that interest in the activity is motivating. We can also help kids think about how they want to present their learning. And of course, with kids, there's so many different ways these days with video and making slideshows or doing an interview. There's so many different ways they can express themselves. And then that's where they get that feeling of agency from. Here's an example of a photography project that was done in a fifth grade classroom. The kids were given disposable cameras, and they were each sent home to take 5 pictures of the things that were most important in their lives. And then the teacher did a variety of writing activities where they wrote about their plans and what they were going to do, and they met with a partner and they figured out how they were going to present it. So here's the project done by one of the students named Elena. And so she decided to send a previous invitation to all her teachers. So she was a fifth grader and she had all her teachers starting in kindergarten. And she sent them this invitation. She picked a date and a time for them to meet in front of the school. And she lined them up and took a picture, a group picture of each of the teachers. And she wrote about them and what they did that mattered in her life and why she picked this as a project. And then as a present, she gave each one a little red envelope with some chocolate money in it, a Chinese New Year, one of those little red Chinese New Year envelopes. So this is an example of something that she was highly motivated, was really creative. It's interesting for the other kids to see. And so it also, by giving kids the opportunity to express their voice, they find ways to learn about themselves, and they can share about their backgrounds and bring forward ideas and stories from their identities. And I had an example when I was teaching in 4th grade. I had students do an activity where they wrote about what they did for the winter holidays with their families. And I had a class in Oakland that had students from Vietnam and from China and from El Salvador and Guatemala, and students from here in the US. So it was a real mixture of kids. And then we sent their little writing stories to the newspaper, and it got published. And so that's another example of how you can make something interesting and motivating and draw from their backgrounds where they all have something to share. Class meetings is another way you can create agency. When you do your class meetings, you create norms for how we're going to talk together. And again, the kids get to put input into those norms. Like what do you need to feel comfortable to speak up in class? And a child might say, well, I need to know that nobody's going to make fun of me. Or a child might say, I don't like it when people make mean nicknames for me. And so they create those norms. Class meetings can be academic discussions where they do the planning of what they're going to do. And it can also be reflection and assessment. There was a teacher that always used class meetings to have kids say, well, how did we do? How are we working together? And the kids would reflect on it. You can also have non-academic discussions with problem solving. There was one example with a teacher who had a class where her students were talking about the meaning of the concept of common sense. And one of the kids said, well, common sense means not going out to East Palo Alto at night in the dark. And there was only one student in the class who'd been bused into Palo Alto, different school district. And so there was one student from East Palo Alto. And when I was observing it, I watched that child just shrink into the ground, kind of embarrassed. And the teacher stopped it and said, well, I think that's a stereotype that you're making. And technically, it's not good to walk out at night in general, but stereotyping one area could make somebody feel bad. And she taught them what a stereotype was, and she did something quickly in the moment, didn't single out any kids, either the ones who said it or the one who felt embarrassed. And then she came back to it, and they did a whole unit or a whole class meeting about stereotypes and when they can be positive and when they can be harmful. Student-led conferences, another thing you can do, often with older students. You can, and this is kind of a how-to. I put it all on the slide because usually I don't put so many words on a slide, but I knew you were all online. But basically, you're preparing the students and working with them to empower them to be able to lead a meeting with their parents. So you want to ask them what do they want to talk about? What is important from what they've learned that they want to share with their parents. And then they create a portfolio with a lot of examples of the things they've done. And they write an invitation to invite their parents. And during the conference, you can give them sentence stems to prepare so that way they can talk about what's going well. They can talk about their strengths. They talk about challenges and how they're addressing them. And then they give examples of their classwork. And of course, after the conference, celebrate with the kids and make plans for the future. This is so empowering, and it creates, again, the sense of agency for that student. You can also use strategies for fostering student leadership to create agency. And that is everything from just in a classroom, having the kids talk about, organize themselves to figure out topics they want to study, how the room can be set up. You can have also school-wide activities, student council, different clubs. We had a conflict manager club at our school, and the kids worked on solving conflicts, bullying prevention. I did a lot of work in bullying prevention with a project called Not in Our School, and it was helping the students take the lead in stopping bullying. And so one example was kids created a map to figure out where bullying took place in their school. And so what they did was they surveyed the kids and they asked them where it took place. And then they looked at where more bullying happened, and they actually did things to address it. That was a high school. And then they made a film, and then a middle school saw the film, and they did the same activity at their school. And they actually identified a particular hallway, kind of an outside hallway, where it was kind of dark and a lot of bullying took place, according to the kids. So they had organized the kids, and they did handprints on the wall, and they called it their high five hallway. And they took a negative space and turned it into a positive one. And this was ideas the kids had. And of course, they can lead assemblies, they can do literacy and math nights with older kids helping younger kids, organizing family events. There's so many ways student leadership can create that sense of agency. Take a minute and think for yourself. How do you foster agency and self-directed learning for students? And what more can you add to your ideas? Unfortunately, I can't see the chat here, but if you want to put it in the chat, we can look at it later. That's just sharing the picture. That top is teenagers from the high school came to our school and did a Chinese New Year celebration in the school where I was principal. And then next to that is my grandson at an event at the library where he has a flag. Then next to that's my daughter, the mother of the little boy in the picture, and that was when she was a little girl. And then the one you met, Priscilla, the 5-year-old, is now when she was in high school. And there's my son, and then there's a basketball game. So all these different things as we're trying to foster agency in children. So the next one is belonging. And there's a lot of talk about belonging, but let's go into it a little bit more deeply to think about what does it really mean to create belonging for students. And so here are some things that belonging feels like. We always talk about it as a sense of belonging because it's this feeling, this just feels right for me here. I matter, I'm respected, I have something to contribute. And we all need this, whether we're kids in school or whether we're adults. And being able to express your authentic self means you don't have to hide any parts of yourself. You don't have to leave any parts of yourself at the door. Visible learning has research on belonging. It's 0.45, so it is one of the things that's very important for students to have. Feeling included is 0.52 effect size. And then you can see the whole climate is where you have that sense of belonging, 0.53, and culturally sustaining practices, which I think the reason it's 1.01, a very high effect size, when you feel that you can be who you are and you can do things without having to change who you are really matters. And this again, a picture from our little property in Nicaragua, and even our dog and our deer were friends and felt belonging with each other. I was amazed. I'd never seen anything like it. This was a deer we rescued and then we released it, went out into the wild. We got it, and you can see it's just growing up at this time that this picture was taken. Before we kind of dive into belonging, we have to talk about othering. As I said before, you can't just only talk about the good things and it's all good, it's all Pollyanna. We have to think about what are the things that undermine what we're trying to do. And bullying and othering is a process of just marginalizing and stigmatizing someone. And it can come from bullying, which is direct, something harmful said to someone. And of course, bullying happens everywhere. So I'm not saying that bullying can be completely eliminated, but there's so much we can do to ensure that kids aren't targeted and bullied. And of course, most of the bullying that takes place has to do with things that people might be different, negative stereotypes about race, about gender, and it can be exclusion and invisibility, but it can also be just reading the news. Some of the news that puts people down, we don't know how hard it can be impacting our kids. I had an example of a girl that teachers gave them an assignment to get our newspaper article and just report on current events. And this girl ran into an article this was a few years ago. It was about a rogue video game that targeted immigrants, and it called you in this video game. You could either be they were either gang members. There were breeders, which was a negative term for women, and terrorists. And so this girl, just a young girl running into this, how is she supposed to feel coming over the border, seeing this game about people who come over the border from Mexico when she and her family came from Mexico? And I'm sure you can think of many examples currently in the news where people of different identities, kids who have gay parents, kids who are from different backgrounds, from the Middle East, getting called terrorists, kids who are Jewish being called names and having coins thrown at them. All this is terribly harmful to kids. So we need to address othering in a very proactive way if we want to make belonging work in our schools. And we need to, before othering even happens, and this is a picture not in our school. I had a contest when I was doing this program, and one of the kids made this as an art project and won the contest. But we need to make the values clear that in our school, it's not acceptable to treat people badly like this. We wanted them to learn the harm of what it is. And the harm, as you know, can last a lifetime. Also, when it's happening, we need to intervene immediately in the moment. When something's being said in class, we need to stop everything and teach, not shaming or blaming or punishing, but making people learn so they can learn to be compassionate toward each other. And after the moment, follow it up and continue to discuss and learn how to do it. And it's not easy because we don't want to single kids out, and we don't want to embarrass. I know a story of a man, when he was in second grade. He was being bullied because he was being teased and called feminine or girl. And so the teacher brought him together with like three or four other kids and asked him to say why he felt so bad. And that was so horrible for him. He said that they just continued to tease him and bully him afterwards. So you have to be really careful how you handle these things. But you need to make it really clear that here we want to accept each other, we want to welcome each other and not be mean and tease and bully. So we counter othering by fostering belonging and valuing instead of ignoring differences. And we work to build connection across difference. And I just put a few examples of the way kids might feel different. And it's everything beyond the things you might think of gender and sexuality and race. It's also kids get bullied for the way they speak. They get bullied. Kids who are overweight have to watch movies that make fun of people being overweight. And that seems to be something that still continues to be pervasive. Also, socioeconomic status and different combinations of these things are so by giving a chance to value kids and let them shine, it but not by ignoring the differences and building those connections, you can really create that sense of belonging. Here are a few strategies. The caring school culture, we all can feel when you walk, even when you walk into a store, you can almost feel the culture in that store. If people are friendly, if people are smiling, if people are looking at each other. So that's intentional community building. It's putting social emotional learning not just as an add-on, but part of helping each other as part of everything we do all day, working together, highlighting and validating and pointing out different ways people are treating each other kindly. It's also the whole network around the classroom in the school, the family involvement, the responsive support systems if a child has a problem with a mental health problem or any other kind of specific support that's needed, having an awareness not only in the classroom but beyond in the schoolyard and all aspects of the school are all part of building a caring culture. Each of these topics could be a whole day of workshops. So I'm trying to kind of build this case for the ABCs, but this is really, really an important thing. As you could see, that school climate is very important in the mega studies in visible learning. Relationships. Relationships are at the heart of everything we do. And the teacher-student relationship is so important. Knowing your students and pronouncing their names correctly, something as simple as that makes so much difference. There's a story one of my friends told me who they're Native American and they live in Wisconsin. And her daughter was at school, and the teacher said to her, I hear there's a powwow recently coming up soon. Are you planning to go? And when you come back, if you could tell me about it, I'd love to learn. That was the first time that student who was in middle school had anybody address something related to her culture. And by knowing her and knowing that, this became the girl's favorite teacher. And to this day, that subject she felt better about. And getting to know the students is so important. Another example is a woman who's a teacher told me that when she was in high school, her brother got deported. And they were from El Salvador, and one of the teachers greeted everybody at the door when class was starting. I know a lot of high school people say, oh, I have so many students, how can I do that? But this teacher managed to do it very quickly, and he just would casually say to her things like, you know, how's your brother doing, or how are you feeling? And that meant so much to her that she acted completely different in his class. She acted out in the other classes, and she was a tough kid. And but in his class, she acted differently. And then she eventually, he was a role model, and she became a teacher. So teacher-student relationship is one of the most important things for creating belonging and identity safety. Also, positive student-student relationships, and that's where we teach students positive social skills. We teach them to be upstanders who speak up and stand up for themselves and others. That's so important as people get ready to go forward in the world, to be successful in their lives, to be able to feel confident to stand up for yourself or to stand up for other people. It's also a big part of our bullying prevention work. And of course, intervening immediately to stop all forms of violence and harassment and bullying. As part of creating belonging, we do what we call cultivating diversity as a resource. Students need to see themselves reflected in every aspect of their student. They need to see that someone like me belongs here. This is an extreme example of seeing yourself reflected on the wall. This is a mural. You can kind of see the hallway behind the mural at one of the schools. It was painted by a local artist, and it matches some of the identities in that particular school. We create that diversity as a resource by helping students feel pride in who they are, but also appreciating differences. It's a reciprocal thing, and it makes for a really positive classroom and school environment. Arranging the room can also make a big difference to create belonging, make it accessible, make it a place for collaboration and building community. And of course, lots of different cooperative activities where they learn together. I'm not sure if you know about Jigsaw, but Jigsaw is actually a model that was started as an equity-focused strategy. And it's basically people learning for each other. So you create these expert groups. Let's say you're doing a particular topic that you're studying sea creatures, sea animals. And but you can also do this in a high school where you're studying a certain time in history. And you break them into groups, and they each have something to read in their group. They read the same thing, and then they talk about it and they discuss it. And then you take that group and you break it up, and with each of the groups, you create new groups with one member of each group. And then they become the experts on the thing that they talked about in their class, in their group. And it allows kids to collaborate so that even if someone doesn't feel so confident, they've just heard something in their expert group that they can share in the other group. And then, of course, just helping each other, helping in the classroom. There's my little Anteo, my grandson, now at the age of 4. He's 5 now. This is a little film I made that's called Our Family, and it's an example of how you can cultivate diversity as a resource. This is about diverse kinds of families, and kids can learn. It's a 3-minute video.
So we have been talking about
a family is people that you care about, people that you love.
my family is totally awesome.
And the more to know that I love my family.
Who's in a family?
Mom, sister, a dad.
Does there have to be a dad?
In my family, I have my dog Emma, my brother Louie, my mom Megan, and my dad John.
What's important in all families?
Some don't have moms, and some have dads, and some have dads and don't have moms. I think my whole class knows that I have 2 moms, and it feels kind of fun at school.
I like to be daddy, honestly, because it gives me meaning and purpose of life. And I think life is seeing growth within yourself, but not only yourself, but your family.
Being a mommy because I get to help little people grow. I don't know what they'll contribute to society, but I know they'll contribute something, something great. Do all families look the same? Think about it. Think about it.
Sometimes people grow up and the white and a black person really likes the white person, so they marry each other. My mom's a different color than me and my dad, and I was adopted into this family, which I think is cool.
I want people to know about our family is that we love each other and we hope that everybody can love like we do.
We would like our children to say that they have a daddy and a papa, and they have lots of fun with their family, and we do lots of interesting things.
Want the most to say that their family loves them and that they're proud of them.
Gigi is very creative and very sensitive.
She wrote this book and it says, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, I'm a girl, but sometimes I'm a boy. Gigi is her own person. She doesn't let anyone label her.
I pronounce myself as a girl and a she. And my family is nice to me and they love me. When we lived in Mexico, it was hard not to live with my dad since he had to stay working here.
La lengua, porque
My mom said is that she wants us to keep our language, which is Spanish, and she also wants us to keep our culture. It is important to have diverse children, to have diverse families at a school so that you know how to include everyone and so that you know how you don't just go to the people that are like you. You reach out and embrace everyone.
Oops, sorry.
So
So let's see how this goes to the next. We have a lesson guide that goes with this film, and we worked in partnership with several other organizations, and I have the link to it. You're going to be getting a copy of the recording after this, so if you don't get a chance to catch it, you can see it later. But this has many activities to show about the value of family diversity and get kids to all feel sense of inclusion. Oops, there we go. So now I want you to think about belonging in your context. Think of a student, or if you don't have a classroom, think of someone you know. Just imagine, think of their facial expressions. Think about how they hold their bodies. Think about their interactions with other people. Think about how you can support this child's belonging and relationship with you and with others. And how can you strengthen the student's sense of confidence in academic progress? We want to pay attention to each child's sense of belonging, because they don't always say it, but you can see it by looking at them. Now we're up to the final, it's the C in the ABC's competence. And think about your own sense of competence in your life. Have you felt competent? Competence actually plays out in a lot of different ways. There's the real actual competence, which means what you know, what you're able to do, what are your particular skills. And then there's your perception about competence, how capable you feel you are in a particular area. And those two kind of interact with each other. You can have an overblown sense of competence, and they did find that in the self-esteem movement, that just by building a sense of self-esteem, sometimes people were all puffed up and thought they were a lot better at things than they were. But you also could have an undermined sense of competence where you don't feel capable. And we're trying to help kids feel capable and become capable. And of course, this is domain specific. You know, you may feel confident and competent in one area and then very weak in another. I know we got an electric car and I have to back it into the driveway, and I don't have a strong sense of competence in my depth perception. And I'm working to get more and more comfortable and competent backing my car in every time when I come home. And one thing I have to do is if I'm on the phone, I need to stop talking so I can focus to build my competence. And so competence includes several different aspects and includes your cognitive skills, the critical thinking and applying knowledge, but also it includes your proficiency in performance and being able to produce something, as well as your learning strategies. And I think we all know students who are very bright and actually competent and knowledgeable, but don't exactly have a good sense of self-regulation or organization. So we're trying to build all those kind of competence. And that's what makes teaching and education such a powerful and such a wonderful creative effort that you have as educators to try and create spaces where all these things happen together. Here's visible learning, little toucan that we had on our property. And so competence is expressed through high expectations, a very high 0.9 effect size. It's also social skills programs, help build competence, 0.48, and feedback, which we'll talk a little more about how to be effective in giving feedback. I once went to a training where they had us, they demonstrated how you could build someone's skills by giving positive and motivating messaging, help them feel like they can do it, cheer them on while they're doing it, give them feedback on how they do it, and then it improves. And they had us in the workshop, we did a long jump, and I really thought I couldn't do it. And so we first had to kind of imagine how we, set a goal for ourselves and then we tried to meet the goal and we got cheered on, and then they gave us some suggestions and we tried it a few times, and it blew me away how far I could jump with that level of support and positive feedback. There was a research study on self-affirmation, and Jeffrey Cohen at Stanford did this study. They broke students into two groups, and one group was asked to write 3 things that were important to them. Not that different from the assignment with the photography, right? Find something that matters. And the control group, they just were asked to write about another topic. I don't exactly know what it was. And this was done with middle school students and high school students, and it was actually repeated several times. And for the students who just wrote about 3 things that were important to them, and their grades improved and their achievement improved, and it was tracked for 2 years. And so something about that really worked. Now it sounds like magic, and really you can't totally change things with one little activity. But this demonstrates that when students really do something that matters, there's Priscilla again. Actually, you saw the high school picture. This is the middle school picture. And you can see that time it was popular to have that little, we called it a copete, little high hairdo. Anyway, when they engage with what matters to them and they feel personal integrity and they're affirmed, this really makes it, this self-affirmation research, doing something that matters and valuing something about their lives that matters really helped. And it particularly was effective with kids in negatively stereotyped groups. And so we're trying to build this competence in an academic identity. I can succeed at this. I belong in this community. And when I put effort into it, I get better and it has value. And this is from Zaretta Hammond's first book. She just did another book, and she has so many wonderful learning strategies that promote student-centered teaching and identity safety. Here's a little bit more about feedback. Again, we could spend a lot more time on this. If we were in a workshop, we'd be trying it out. But basically, WISE feedback was some more research, and there's a link to where you can read an article about it. You communicate high expectations, but you also communicate you believe the student can meet those expectations. And then you give the feedback on how they could improve, and along the way share progress. So this combination really makes a difference. the fact that you believe someone can do it and you're communicating your expectations, but you're also giving them tools and suggestions that can help. Kind of like that activity I did with the broad jump. There's also formative assessment, which is a longer term form of feedback. And WestEd, there's a link to how to use this. And I've done some articles for Corwin on identity safe formative assessment. But it's basically an assessment cycle that you do with students. And you begin by the orange, where it says, where am I going? And you work with the kids to develop learning goals and develop success criteria. And so you're giving them, thinking about what are the positive messages you can help them to build their competence. Then you get to the light blue section, which is, where am I now? So along the way, they're looking at the evidence they've collected, and they're gathering evidence, and they're interpreting the evidence. And as a teacher, you're trying to support that sense of rigor, and you're trying to see how the evidence will show and be interpreted, and so you can support them in that. And then you get to the yellow or the golden color, and that's where to next. So now we're looking back at what we've learned, how we've met the goals, and then you're figuring out what is your next step to start the cycle again. And you're taking that feedback and you're applying it. And so as a teacher, you're asking yourself, what can I do to help the student develop this culture of learner-directed action? So now I want you to take a minute. We're just about ready to go to the questions, and think for a few minutes, or if you have a pen, write down what's something you can work on to strengthen in the coming week in the area of agency, belonging, and competence, or in one of those areas. What are you going to try? And how will you know if that helped the students? I'll give you a minute to think about this. And now I'm going to open up for questions. Well,
there are no questions in the chat right now. So if you have a question, please post it in the chat. Okay, well, thank you to Becki, and thank you to everyone who has attended. And we will see you next time. Everybody have a great evening.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.